phones. And for those of you who are joining us on the Zoom, please keep yourself muted unless you're called upon to speak. Everybody ready? The City of Glendale Common Council is now in session. Everybody please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Call the roll.
Mayor Kennedy,
Here.
Alderwoman Vukovic, Alderman Doherty,
Here.
Alderman Gelhardt,
Here.
Alderman Bailey,
Here.
Alderman Schmelzling.
Here.
Alderwoman Shaw.
Great, thank you. First item on the agenda is public comment. Glendale residents, business owners, and property owners are invited to speak to the council on items that are not on tonight's agenda, but are within the city's ability to regulate or control. Is there anyone wishing to address the mayor and council on a non-agenda item? Jenny? And it should, as long as you talk directly into the microphone, it should be. And of course, several of us know your name, but if you please, for the record, state your name and address.
6861 North Ironwood Lane, Glendale.
Okay.
Huge shout out, thank you to the police and for all you guys with the up on Ironwood and the parking and all of that. And we all realize you can't keep it up indefinitely. And I try very hard not to get into arguments and keeping my mouth shut when I'm down there. It's kind of hard. But it's a fine line between parking and picking up, and as long as the truck's running or the car's running, they're just parked indefinitely, yada, yada, yada. But on Elmwood, it is no parking, stopping, or standing. And according to Schedule J, that is a ticketable offense because it's in there. And if you don't want to do that, fine, I can understand that. In the state statutes 118.093, each school has a protected safety zone where kids are supposed to be dropped off and picked up. That is not one of them. Now, I don't know if you can give tickets on state statutes or how that works, but I'm tired of getting into arguments with these parents. I'm not really stopped. I'm just here for a minute and they're sitting there for 20 minutes waiting for these kids to come out. I understand it's iffy and sketchy up by the school with the road closed and everything. But I got a guy down the street, Mark, his son Noah has cerebral palsy. He has to weave in and out every single day because these parents are zooming. And I understand it's only a 25-mile-an-hour zone. But when you have a kid in a wheelchair and there's a car coming at you, even at 5 miles an hour, that's not right. It needs to literally be stopped. And if that means we have to go to the school and demand it, then trust me, the people in my neighborhood are willing to do that. I will not be spokesperson though. But anyway, a huge shout out. And again, I realize you can't keep it up indefinitely because as soon as you're gone, they're going to start it up again. So I don't know what the answer is, but the state statute should be adhered to, if not by you guys or the state, then by the school. That's it. Thank you.
We will follow up with the superintendent. I just made a note here. Anyone else wishing to speak in public comment? Yes, sir. Go ahead. And just like I told Jenny, state your name and address and make sure you speak directly into the microphone. See this little red part here that's lit up when I'm speaking? When you start to speak, the part right there should light up for you too. Otherwise, the folks on the Zoom can't hear you.
Great. Thank you kindly.
Yeah.
My name is Rouse. I live at 5736 North Dexter Avenue. And I'm here just to let you know about something that's going on in terms of noise. I brought along, if you're interested, just a Google map of where I live and how it relates to the Brady Corporation, which I can hear in my house. Over the last year, I also had to deal with a brain injury due to a car accident. But this, and it's made it very hard because it's very hard for me to sleep in my house with windows shut, and I have some windows insulation on them to block the noise. The noise really came on strong last year after the brush and the trees were cut down off of the bike trail, which is basically an embankment in front of Brady in that corner with Johnson Controls. And also last summer, I think power company or somebody went through, I back up to the power lines and they cut back the trees and brush on there as well. And I was like, what is that sound? And I drove around, and it is the pitch, everything was coming from Brady Corporation. It only happens when the wind is coming in that direction. So I don't know what remedy there is. I just wanted to bring it to your attention. If it stands as it is, I'm going to have to move. I can't live in the house. I'm willing to put, new windows on, but that's thousands of dollars. I don't know if it'll block the noise. The reason I brought the map is because I just wanted to take a picture because am I nuts? I did have I was told by someone at, on the phone that I should, if I hear the noise again, call the police and they can take a reading. Police did come out. There's a police report. He agreed it was rather loud. He could hear it. It's a real thing. But he said, I'm not set up to detect something that's coming in the air from a mile away. But there is a report on file. On behest of my alderperson last summer, I kept a log for 10 days. Because I wasn't sure why the sound was intermittent, because when the wind is coming from the southwest, you can't hear it. But when it comes from the northeast, I can't sleep. I've tried to make some remedies, but I'm either going to have to replace my windows with something soundproof or move. So I took my last point, I guess I took a quick Google shot, and right where Johnson Control put their new buildings, it literally, if you draw a line on those buildings, and they come right to my house. So the sound literally is being funneled. It's coming off of Brady Corp. It's hitting the Johnson Control buildings, and it's coming straight at what I would consider the northwestern area of Crestwood. And then, of course, on the other side, we have that embankment of the railroad coming up the backside. So it is kind of a funneling the noise. So I have that information if you'd like it. I just wanted to speak before you. I appreciate the opportunity, and I generally love living in Glendale.
Thank you. And you're positive Brady,
Yes.
because I live a block south of you. So I'm on 5600 block of Bethmar.
Sure.
So right where Dexter and Bethmar split. And I know from walking my dog, I can hear Millipore Sigma, which is on Teutonia. Often I can hear it even like down, like, near my house even. But it's obviously like, I'll hear the noise and I'll be walking the dog and I'll get up a little further where I'm actually up right next to Millipore Sigma on the bike trail. And I can tell that's the noise I've been hearing for the last 10 minutes while I was walking. That's why I'm asking, you're positive it's Brady, because for us to reach out to corporations about noise, we need to make sure that we know exactly which one it is. And Millipore happens to be in Milwaukee. So, because I've actually mentioned it to the previous city administrator, the noise from Millipore Sigma.
Sure. First of all, the noise is only glaring when it's coming from the northeast.
Okay.
Northwest would be Sigma. And again, I have a Google map here, and I've taken a log and I really plan where I'm going to sleep in my house according to the wind direction. I swear it's that I have new windows. I have a new roof. I've put money into my house, and so it's not bad windows or anything. And I didn't have a problem with this noise. I've been at that address for 15 years. So, and so one day, and again, this summer after things were cut down, I was like, what is that blanket noise? And I thought it might be, I didn't know where it's coming from. I just knew it was coming from out there. And I thought it was the lighting place over by the Little League fields. So I just got in my car and I drove around. And unfortunately, I hear the noise almost every night. So I'm very familiar with the pitch, and I understand music and notes. And And I drove around and I'm like, well, it's not Visa lighting. And so I just kind of went down. I thought it was kind of coming from the northeast. And then I recently had work done over at Collision Caliber. And so I said, well, maybe it's something here in this industrial park, and it's Brady. It's Brady. And I've also walked the area, and if you walk up Dexter and over around Wingate Park, you can hear it, and it's coming from that direction. It's not coming from the northwest. And the night I called the officer, and really grateful he came out. It was very nice that they did that. I didn't think an actual officer would come out, but the night that he came out, the wind was coming from the northeast. It was a rainy, windy night coming in from the northeast. So that is the exact same pitch and sound. I went and stood before it, and for some reason it just funnels towards that area of the neighborhood. But I'm highly confident it's not.
The sound reading. If it's producing noise off of their property? It should be above decibel. Right, yeah, right. And if so I mean, that would help. Before we reach out to Brady, I'd like to get a decibel reading from.
Sure. Actually, it's a little more apparent when the ambient sound dies down. So it does crystallize a little bit more at night because you don't have the freeway and Silver Spring providing a little layer of white noise. So at night it's very clear, but you can hear it during the daytime. It's a little diluted, but I would say at night when there's less ambient noise, like when I'm trying to sleep, it just is a clear. And I would say wind direction is key. When I first called in, and I apologize to my alderperson, I called Glendale and the front desk, and I said, I want to make a noise complaint. And then I called back a week later and I said, I don't hear the noise anymore. I withdraw, but I didn't know at that time that it was due to the wind direction. When the wind is coming at you, for some reason it catches that. I think a good reading might be right at that embankment. Just take a step back from it, and I appreciate whatever can be done.
Okay.
I was interested to see if you're intermittent, if you crack the code on that, but no, it's not like, it's at night and the wind's correct. It's not any other, like they're doing cleaning or something weird. It's quite often.
This has been on the money since, I would say, I made that trip around the neighborhood in June of July of 22.
Like if the wind was blowing right, you'd hear it every night.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And
cool.
if it's
Thanks.
coming from the northeast, it is strong, and the stronger the wind, the stronger the noise. And anywhere between north and east, which is really where, I finally looked at a map and I'm like, well, yeah, it's right. No, it's directly northeast from my house. And part of what's happening too is the sound that normally would have been dispersed where those buildings at Johnson Controls are. That is effectively a wall that's pushing it towards that part of the neighborhood. And again, I thought I had heard some hum before, but I thought it was my neighbor down the street, maybe doing some work in his basement. He's a mechanic. But I've had my windows open throughout the summer. I mean, I love I have a garden. I love where I live. I love my house, my backyard. And I haven't heard any of that until summer of 22. And that was when and I know you guys probably had nothing to do with all these trees being cut down, but I think that was probably the main issue, because that served as a pretty stout sound buffer right on that embankment. And then also the power lines, and they're gone. And, I don't think it's Glendale's fault at all. It's just one of those things that happens.
We can reach out to Brady Corporation. So the chief will have one of his officers go by in the evening and take a reading just off of their property. Because we have sound restrictions. And so these factories that operate, or any businesses that operate, the light can't spill off of their property. The sound can't, be too loud off of their property. And so if they're able to get sound readings, across the street from Brady Corporation that are loud, then we have the ability to go and talk to them and say, hey, you're violating our nighttime noise ordinance. So.
Gotcha. I do think that it will be, because it's a taller building.
Mhm.
If you go right up next to the building, it won't be as loud as if you're maybe
Right.
more near the
Off the property.
it's during the day, as long as in terms of it's the number one variable is wind direction. And the second variable would be day or night. Some of the sound gets lost in the ambient noise during the high traffic of the day. You still hear it. I mean, there's times I've been on a walk, I'm like, wow, walking by Wingate Park, just, and I'm like, so I would say it is louder at night because it's more discernible. There's no white noise, so.
Well, we'll, you gave your name and address, so make sure that Carl has contact information for you. We'll get back with you once we have a chance to get some sound readings from Brady, and then we'll, if indeed we get the noise levels coming from the sound check from the police, then we have the ability to reach out to them as a corporation and talk with them about the noise ordinance and find out what the problem is. Sometimes it could even be if, an HVAC system needs servicing, is on the roof and is making too much noise and they don't realize it inside, but the neighbors a block or two away are getting all that noise. So, yeah.
I work for a manufacturer in Muskego, and we have a very similar exhaust system.
Right.
And you can hear it's almost like a whine or a pitch.
Right.
And so I understand, and
Okay.
noise does different things. It carries,
Right.
it bounces off things. So I
Right.
really appreciate the
Sure.
opportunity.
No problem.
To
Thank
share.
you. Yep. Anyone else wishing to speak in public comment? Yes, ma'am.
My questions and comments are related to, I just possibly.
Okay. I can call on you when we get to G. All right. Anyone else for public comment? Anyone on the Zoom wishing to speak to a non-agenda item? If so, you may unmute and state your name and address.
Hey, Robert Cronwell, 7530 North Applewood Lane. I was hoping the city could do a little bit more with the traffic that's backing up at Green Tree and Jean Nicolay. I think early last week, I didn't notice a police presence out there, and it was backing up onto Port Washington Road through the stoplights there, and it's backing up in the other direction as well. But for the last several days, there have been police directing traffic, and it's helped a little bit, but it still really gets backed up and clogged back and is interfering with the traffic all the way out to Port Washington Road and beyond. So anything more that can be done would be helpful. Thanks.
Yeah, Mr. Cronwell, actually, that intersection is River Hills. We're there to assist them, and they didn't have enough personnel the first couple of days. That's why it really backed up. But it's sort of like a ballet act. Is you've got to get the cars in off of Jean Nicolay and try not to affect Port Road. But there's so many cars coming at the same time. We're doing our best, but there's going to be some congestion there.
Thank you, Chief. Anyone else for public comment? All right, we will move on then. Consent agenda, there's just one item. The accounts payable were not able to be run off. They weren't included in our packets. So the consent agenda just has the adoption of the minutes. So can I just get a motion to adopt the minutes from our meeting on February 27th, please?
Moved.
Moved by Alderman Schmelzing. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Bailey. Any corrections, any discussion? All those in favor of adopting the minutes for our last meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And accounts payable will be before us at our next meeting, so. All right, next is a public forum on No Mow May. So we did have a discussion about a month ago. We decided we would have a public forum tonight where any resident can come out and talk for or against No Mow May. I do see there's just a couple people on the Zoom, so I'm actually going to start with the Zoom before we go for people in the audience. So if you are on the Zoom and you wanted to speak for or against No Mow May, I will go ahead and open up the public forum. We're looking tonight to get comments from people, your thoughts, if you've got suggestions, ways to educate people one way or the other. Do you think we should do it? Do you think it was successful last year? Do you think it was a miserable failure? So I'll let you just, give everybody about say 2 to 3 minutes. So please ask you, I'm not going to set a timer and be like a hard and fast, your 2 minutes are up. But also if you start speaking 4, 5, 6 minutes, I'm going to tell you your time is up. So try and just brief comments. So Cheryl, I noticed that you've turned on your camera. You may unmute, state your name and address, please.
Hi, Cheryl Moranto, 6563 North Crestwood Drive. I am speaking in support of No Mow May. I actually brought it to the council last year and was thrilled that you approved it, and I really hope you'll do it again. It seems like a pretty easy, minimal thing to do, and it's the right thing to do. You know, we know that pollinators are endangered. We know this is a critical time for them to be able to have some shelter and hatch their young. And so and I loved it. And it's only a month. It's not like things get unruly in a month, especially the month of May. So I very much hope that you will approve it again. I think it's consistent with the green values of the city and part of the reason I like living in Glendale. So thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Is there anyone else on the Zoom that wishes to speak in the public forum for No Mow May? If so, you may unmute and state your name and address. All right, we'll go with folks now that are here in the council chambers. Is there anyone that came out to speak tonight regarding No Mow May? All right, I did receive several emails from folks over the last couple of days. I'll forward all those on to staff. I'll send them to Carl and John and Charlie, make sure that you all have them. And it was kind of a mixed bag. Some for, some against, and some that were against actually had a lot of other suggestions and ideas. So I'll forward those on to folks. Did anybody in the council want to speak to anything about No Mow May? Anybody else? Yeah, go ahead.
I've got a few comments that I collected. I'll just go right down the list. Lawns aren't great sources for pollinators or wildlife habitat unless the lawns are covered with dandelions and clover. Truthfully speaking, in my neighborhood and most of my district, most lawns are not covered by dandelions and clover. So it doesn't really make for a good source of food for the bees. The grass will get so long that it will flop over on top of itself, shading itself out and potentially causing dead spots. Some spots may need spot seeding.
Comments from your resident?
Yes, these are
Okay,
comments.
okay.
When you allow grass to grow long and then suddenly cut it, the mowing can send grass into shock. Grass roots become diminished and your lawn weakens, making it susceptible to insects and diseases. There are a lot of unwanted pests that love tall grass, such as mosquitoes, fleas, and ticks. Allowing your lawn to go untended for the month of May, it will get infested with weeds, which will then be required to be treated with herbicides, which brings us back to the idea of harming our pollinators with herbicides. And so one alternative that was suggested was planting native gardens when the flowers that come up in those gardens are a good source of pollen for the bees. So that's all I got.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I reached out to my hear back from several of them, the majority in favor, only 3 or 4 no's, but very similar comments to the other ones, but just that was the feedback I got so far.
Else?
I did some random doors on this, so I just pick a random road and a random address within the range in my district. And I had, most people were in favor. I had, let's see, about 60% said they didn't care one way or the other, but they didn't feel like they should stand in the way of people who would want to. 40% were in favor for my doors. I also got some emails. I had one person who was concerned about the aesthetics and like weeds getting blown into their yard. But 3 other people were in favor of it. And then I did a survey through my mail list. 73% in favor, 14 didn't really care, and 14 were opposed percent. So it seems like most people are in favor, and I can speak to my own experience. I did this last year, and I think it is about behavior change. I've gotten less picky about my lawn and my neighbors don't really seem to care. My lawn's still in better shape than one of my neighbors, and my other neighbor, well, he has lots of other things that he probably thinks that I don't really care too much about in some regards. So we all have our own property. We all have our own things that we want to have in our property. And I've stopped using pesticides and herbicides, and I feel like it's better for that reason. And it's been at least a year or two now. I think the annual reminder of that is helpful. I think it is just a first step, though. The research I did does say that, you know, it's a nod to it. It's not like you're going to solve the bee problem with that. You need natural plantings and trees and such. So, but I think an annual reminder is helpful to that. And if we could do signage or something like that, or at least encourage that so that people don't feel that it's just being left to go in disrepair, I think that would go a long way in making it something we do consciously. And I also, I passed around, I think in one of the last meetings, some paperwork, which is in my laptop bag, that we could do something that just puts in place our natural landscape ordinance, but allows grass to grow in that, which has protections for things like thistle and stuff that should be pulled out anyway. So if that's getting out of control, we could also make sure things are then cut back away from the sidewalks. We could do something like that to balance things if needed. But from my perspective, it's 1 month, cut it off right in June, and we should be good. Thank you for listening.
Any other comments that anybody wanted to share? Alderman Doherty?
I think everyone knows I'm in favor of the bees. We ought to get more people on that front because we need more bees. But the research I've done in our neighborhood just has not been anybody wildly supportive of, but to guess not anyone wildly against. So I've kind of got more middle of the road comments. I'm not sure like where Steve's at. I think that the reading I've done didn't make it sound like it was that. It's not like it is a cure-all. Maybe it is something for attitude, but I kind of, it's a mixed bag. I don't think it's a clear answer for me, but.
I did just forward. Some
I'll
of them
forward
about
my comments
education
as well.
Some of them about education. One actually talked about how if you cut the grass really short once at the beginning of the season, then it actually allows for everything to grow up for a while. Whereas if you just let it all grow, I mean, it was somebody who's a specialist in turf grass. So pass that on. And so some education things there. So we're not slated tonight to make a decision about No Mow May. And frankly, it's only March, so we still have some time. But we wanted to be able to have the forum. So I want to thank those that participated tonight and shared their comments. And certainly thanks to all of the residents of the various districts who spoke with their alderperson. We'll have this on the agenda for next month or for next meeting. And at that point, we can decide whether we're going to go forward with it or whether we want to do more of a public education campaign about how we can support the pollinators. So I guess be prepared with the comments that you've gotten for us to be able to make some sort of a decision. And Carl, if you could maybe sort of put together couple of options for us for our next meeting.
I will definitely do that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, we will now move on to our new business items. The first new business item, item 5A, is a proclamation designating April 2nd, 2023 as Education and Sharing Day in the city of Glendale. We approved one of these proclamations last year. Outreach from one of the synagogues. They asked us to promote Education and Sharing Day, which is really just about how we, teach values of how to be a good citizen, a good caring person, good human being, instill those values in our children. And it's in honor of a rabbi in the Lubavitch community. So this came before us last year. We did approve it then, came back and asked us again this year. So I have the proclamation sent out to you all in your packets. Would somebody like to make a motion to adopt the proclamation, please?
So moved.
Moved by Alderman Gelhardt, seconded by Alderman Doherty. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of adopting the resolution or the proclamation, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, item 5B is review and approval of an ordinance. This is a lengthy one here. so staff have actually been going through our ordinances, found a bunch of committees that don't actually exist, don't function. We haven't named anybody to them for years. So they came back with a recommendation for, this is an ordinance to eliminate the Advisory Committee on Aesthetics and Conservation, the Floodplain Management Advisory Committee, the Marketing Committee, the Architecture Review Board, and the Board of Public Works, and to modify the duties and responsibilities of the Plan Commission, allocating the duties of the Architecture Review Board to staff and to the Plan Commission, and renaming the Plan Commission to the Planning and Architecture Review Commission. And I'm just going to give a little bit of background on the Architecture Review Board. A number of our suburban communities were built as subdivisions, and they had deed restrictions and design requirements within those particular subdivisions. At the time the communities were being built, those neighborhoods had their own architecture review committees that were responsible for approving new homes as they were coming in, that they meet the design requirements. And then when those communities were finished being built out, those deed restrictions were to remain in place for 25 years and were to be overseen by the city. So we created an architecture review board essentially to be the police on these different deed restrictions, and they varied from neighborhood to neighborhood. And we got to the late 90s and all of those deed restrictions had at that point expired. So we developed our own standards as a city to design requirements around fences and exterior structures. But the Architecture Review Board meets now once a month to approve whether or not somebody can change the siding on their house, whether or not they can build a deck. And so a lot of this stuff is really stuff that can be handled by staff. And major things, like if somebody does buy one of the few undeveloped lots in the city and wants to build a new house, well, that can go before the Plan Commission as a Planning and Architecture Review Commission. So there is still an oversight process there beyond just staff. And so that's the one that I worked with staff on, but in the process of that, John came up with so many others. He came across all these committees like, we haven't appointed anybody to this in decades. And I'm like, okay, so that's where this ordinance comes from. But particularly the Architecture Review Board, so in so many other communities around us, most of what the ARB approves is actually handled by staff. And the few big things that might come up can very easily be referred to the Plan Commission where we already have a group. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to John for more input on some of the other things you've come up with here.
Sure. Thanks, Mayor. That was a great introduction. Carl found some of those committees too. So give some credit to Carl too. Some of the other things with regard to the Planning Commission, you all know that the Planning Commission is responsible for the master plan. We just compared state statutes to what our text was, made a few little tweaks. There's also something called an official map, which Glendale does not have, but we basically took the language from state statutes and brought that over. So if that's something the Planning Commission and the City Council chooses to do, which can be a very helpful document, actually. And then just cleaned up a few other little places here and there and clarified some things with regard to Planning Commission, and then brought some of the architectural control board language over into the Planning Commission section, which would be called the Planning and Architectural Review Commission, or PARC, as the mayor coined the acronym the other day with me. So.
And the last meeting of the Architecture Review Board would be in April, which it would coincide with the end of the term. So the folks who are currently serving on the ARB, their term goes through April 30th of next year or this year. So there would be one more Architecture Review Board meeting in April. But once we get this done and we have to sign, then we still have to publish it and notice it to the public anyway. So
the follow-up step would be, we have design guidelines for Port Washington Road, for Silver Spring. What staff will do over the next couple months is come up with some design standards for residential that would say these items are going to be approved by staff. Here's a couple basic standards. You know, brand new construction for a new single family home or duplex would go to Planning Commission. Here's some, contextual standards, those types of things.
Oh, any questions or comments from folks? All right, can we get a motion then to approve the ordinance as presented by staff?
So moved.
Moved by Alderman Bailey. Is there a second? Second by Alderman Vukovic. No discussion? All right, we'll call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, next is a request for Plan Commission review on a zoning text amendment, amending and renaming Title 13, Article K, accessory uses and structures, fences and hedges, portable storage structures and donation drop-off boxes, and amending section 13.1.142, fences and hedges of Title 13, zoning, and amending Title 8, human health hazard public nuisance, section 8.1.9 sub D sub 13 of the Code of General Ordinances of the City of Glendale. And I'll turn it over to staff for an explanation.
Thank you, Mayor. So there's a couple items with regard to fences that this ordinance deals with. One is clarification of fencing and hedges and those types of things between commercial, industrial, and single family, providing a maintenance requirement that will help our maintenance team, property maintenance team, specifying that hedges and windbreaks do not require permits. So right now it's a little vague. Someone might be able to argue that you need a permit for a hedge. And then clarification of height restrictions in certain neighborhoods. So this kind of follows up on what the mayor was saying with regard to the Architectural Review Board. So most neighborhoods south of Bender do not have deed restrictions. Most larger neighborhoods north of Bender do have deed restrictions. And our current ordinance actually refers to those deed restrictions. So if a citizen's looking at our ordinance, they have to reference this other document, which we just happen to have like one paper copy of these here in City Hall, but otherwise you'd actually have to go to the Register of Deeds to find this document on what it says. And it basically says in most of those neighborhoods, generally around 4 feet, some are 5 feet, it varies a little bit. And so our ordinance is referencing deed restrictions. So it's kind of that's kind of unusual. Usually your ordinance is self-contained. And then the other part was the waivers for fence permits from your neighbors. So I want to dive a little bit deeper into those two topics just for clarification. So with those deed restrictions, what you have before you for this evening, and this is a zoning ordinance, so the process does start off with council, will go to planning commission. They may or may not have a public hearing. Then it will come back to city council for their formal public hearing and then move forward from there. So we're at the very beginning of this process. So we're sort of still at the discussion stages just to kind of set the table that way. So with regard to those deed restrictions, what we did was we put a table. So we went through all of the deed restrictions that we know of. And instead of referencing them randomly, we actually summarize them in a table. So you have each neighborhood and it actually has what it's there. So you don't have to any longer go off and look at some other document. Staff did debate back and forth whether it should just be a standard across the whole city or if we should keep that intent. Of some of the neighbors I have talked to in those neighborhoods, those who have been around a long time, they value that shorter fence. Some new neighbors coming in, they may value a higher fence, but we thought maybe we should just kind of keep a little bit with the status quo, but try to clean it up and make it more user friendly. With regard to the waivers, there's lots of confusion with regard to waivers and depending on how much somebody reads in the ordinance. So basically the current ordinance requires a waiver from all adjoining properties if you want to put a fence up. So if you have 3 neighbors or 6 neighbors, you have to get waivers from all of them. If you cannot get a waiver from them, if you don't come into City Hall with your application, let's say you can't get a hold of them, city staff will send a letter out to that property owner. But if we do not hear a response from them, we would just consider it no response. If someone does say no, they don't want their neighbor to have a fence. What the current ordinance says is that the only way staff can deny the permit is if they determine that the fence will lower property values in the area. I've talked to a couple real estate agents from house to house, property to property. It's really hard. It's not even really quite possible to say that any one particular thing is going to make one house on a block have a little higher value than another one. And a fence is probably not going to be that point between why one house sells for 5 or 10,000 more than another. It's probably because somebody has better, newer mechanicals or they have a remodeled kitchen. Those are going to probably do that. So it gets really kind of, and in fact, speaking to our previous community development director, he wasn't aware of any denials of any fences. And I think we had just one this last year. So we go through a very complicated process and then the permits are issued. So people sometimes have to wait. They try to, they spend weekends trying to get a hold of their neighbors and then possibly there's another 30-day wait. So it is kind of a longer process. So that is, just we're up for that discussion. So if you have feedback on that, certainly could be considered at Planning Commission and then back before it returns to all of you. So
The request tonight is for us to refer this to the Plan Commission.
correct.
Okay. Can we get a motion to refer this to the Plan Commission? Moved by Alderwoman Shaw. Is there a second? Second by Alderwoman Vukovic. Any discussion? Yeah, Alderman Bailey?
Yeah, I mean, and I raised this in an email earlier today, but just the conversation around the notification of the neighbors. I completely understand the complexity of reaching neighbors that aren't reachable. But it does present a situation where someone could, in theory, build a fence and not be noticed, or your neighbor could be surprised. So
We don't do that with sheds.
mhm.
So I've had a number of people like, how did my neighbor get a shed? Well, you have this 10-foot shed, looming on your property line versus a fence. So we do treat things differently. But it could be a surprise when you come home and there's a fence next to you in your neighbor's yard. Yeah.
Having spent significant money cleaning up the former green fence line of my house, I would definitely be disappointed to see that if a neighbor did it to me. But I would like to say that, as this goes through the process, can there be some sort of mechanism of a notice so that it's not a surprise? So at least as a compromise, so there's a discussion so that you're not getting denied by one angry neighbor, but there be some sort of mechanism that prevents the surprise.
So we do have something similar to that with regard to the chicken ordinance, which basically says that it is the responsibility of the property owner who wants to put the fence up to come to City Hall with some documentation that they have communicated to their neighbors, that the neighbors are aware of it. It doesn't mean they can say yes or no. It just means, yes, I'm aware of it. And once we look at it and they have three neighbors and they show the three neighbors and I can confirm names, then we would move it through. So it does still put the burden on them, but there's not with regard to the chicken ordinance, someone can't say no or think that if they say no, then nothing's going to happen. So
And
there are some options to consider.
And this will come up with the plan.
absolutely.
I think from the thing I've noticed is it seems like the people who are asking for fences either have dogs or small children. And by and large, the number of people that I've seen these where we've had appeals in the past over fences, and it's almost always been, I have a dog and now I can't put my dog in the yard because you won't let me build a fence.
And you'd actually think it was pools, but actually in the last year, the number of pools that have been built without fences that have the safety ladder, there's more of those that don't have fences that are just open to their neighbors' yards. You'd think it would be pools would be, but it's probably more dogs and small children. You're right.
This is Wisconsin. You can use a pool for like 3 weeks. So. All right. Yeah, Alderman Schmelzing.
Just real quick on if you do the notification though, it implies that like you might be able to do something about it if you don't agree with it. So I don't know, I guess if you're surprised that a fence went up, then I don't know, maybe you should be talking more to your neighbors. I don't know. I don't know, just thinking, I don't want to put more work on staff and people.
Well, it's going to come up at the plan commission. There'll be
Yeah.
public hearing. So.
Yeah, well,
yeah.
that's just my immediate thoughts, but
Yeah.
yeah, we'll leave it for the other discussion as well.
Okay. Alderman Vukovic, yeah.
I know this is coming in the planning commission, but we don't get to speak in the planning commission, so at least.
No, but then it comes back to us. So, yeah.
Right, but one of the things that we're talking about fences, I had 2 different incidences over the last couple of years. One where the property line was literally negative 2 inches an inch from this lady's house, and they put it on the property line. They were legally able to do it and all that stuff, but she can't even get to one side of her house because her property line goes exactly where, like this much from her. So that's one concern I had. But on the other concern is the opposite, where you have a fence and somebody moves in and doesn't like the fence and wants to take it out. And they take it out and someone has put a fence around their house except for that because that fence was already there. And now they have an open concept fence. So I just suggest that when we do some stuff, we do it also if you're removing a fence as well. Because if you remove a fence and someone, like say, here is one house and they put a fence around there, but there's already a fence. It's this person's fence, but they decide to take it out. So now either they have to pay more money for a new fence that's not gonna match possibly. Or, so I think it should be both ways. In thinking that if you're gonna remove a fence, because it also could, do some damage to one or the other. But
We do have the requirement if there's already an existing fence, the layout on the back of the property line, you would build off of the one that's already there rather than having two fences right back to back.
right, so
And so, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
I haven't heard of that happening, but
it happened last year in District 1 on Iroquois Avenue.
All right, any further discussion? Yes, Alderwoman Shaw.
To piggyback on what Alderman Vukovic had said, I agree, be very cognizant of property lines because I know properties on the north side of Glendale are much larger than properties on the south side of Glendale. Believe me, I have a lot of people who argue over fences in my subdivision.
They're, all right, Mayor, but they are literally so close to, like, property lines are going up to the side of people's houses almost in certain areas in my district. So I just wanted people to be aware of that. And
it is an issue with, I'd be glad to look into that for the planning commission. That is an issue that we have seen, particularly when you have a house that's, a few feet from a property line and somebody decides to bring the fence towards the front of their house, then they create this tiny little narrow area where if they had just stopped it at the back of the house, then people would have had better access and you'd only have limited access at a point versus a long area. So
I have one lady that in one house, if something happened and she couldn't get out her front door and she had to get out, she would instantly jump out of her house onto the other person's property and they fight. So I'm just saying, they don't get along. So I'm just concerned.
Yeah.
Let's just make things happier and safer and
We have a-
happiness throughout the world.
A lot of good comments here to consider whether it comes up to the plan commission in the hearings. Yep. All right, any other comments? Yeah, all those in favor of referring to the plan commission, please say aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Well, our comments, it
They'll be in the minutes of tonight's meeting,
So
so.
what I'll probably do is I will take your comments and provide them to planning commission with some revised or new recommended language from the draft that came out today so that they can consider that with those comments.
All right, thank you. Next is item 5D, recommending that to the plan commission, consider a revised general development plan for AH&S Realty LLC, Olivia Incorporated, doing business as Casa de Corazon, for a proposed daycare and preschool at 4600 North Port Washington Road in the planned unit development zoning classification, planned mixed use land use classification, and I'll turn it over to staff.
Thank you, Mayor. This property is already zoned as a planned development district. It's been a planned development district for 20 years. However, the current property owner is looking to sell the property and they have a current potential new owner. So the current property owner is working with the future property owner to go through this process. They're sort of sharing the responsibility. This is the red one-story down on Port Washington Road. And the proposal would be to have a daycare and school in the building. Generally, they be getting rid of some of the parking, putting in some rain gardens and some other gardens and some places for some chickens and those types of things. So this would be the beginning of that plan development process. So just as a reminder, it will go to planning commission and then it would come back to city council and we'd go through a specific development plan and then a development agreement at the end.
All right. Get a motion then to refer this to the plan commission? Moved by Alderman Doherty, second by Alderman Vukovic. Any discussion or questions from members of the council? All right, all those in favor of referring this to the plan commission, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Next are a series of scheduling public hearings. So the first one, item 5E, is a request to schedule a public hearing on a zoning map amendment This is for Meta House at 4160 North Port Washington Road. We've been through the process already of the land use change. This is now the zoning map amendment from an M1 warehouse light manufacturing office and services district to a PD plan development district. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Fellows.
Mayor, I think you kind of summed it up pretty well. It went to planning commission.
By reading the title?
Yeah, by reading the title, I guess, but you guys saw this a few months ago. You've seen it a couple times now with the comprehensive plan map amendment. This is the rezoning process. It is going to be a plan development district, so you will see in the proposed development at the next meeting. They're continuing to revise their plans, so you'll see those at the next public hearing, and then we'll go through a specific development plan and a development agreement in the next month. So this request is essentially to allow staff to schedule a public hearing within the next 30 days or so.
Okay, can we get a motion then to direct staff to schedule a public hearing?
So moved.
Moved by Alderman Vukovic, second by Alderman Bailey. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, item 5F is a request to schedule a public hearing on a zoning map amendment from B1P Business and Commercial District to M1 Warehouse Light Manufacturing Office and Service District. And this is for the Sprecher property at 727 West Glendale Avenue.
Yes, Sprecher would like to rezone the property. Right now, it's a business district. The southern building on the property is an industrial building, and they have a great demand for more warehousing and space. And so by rezoning it to light manufacturing, it would allow them to continue developing their business model, as well as it does comply with the comprehensive plan. It is considered a mixed use district down there for industrial and commercial. So it does kind of fit in, leaving the northern two parcels still B1.
All right, and this actually already went to the Plan Commission, correct?
It went to City Council, Planning Commission hearing, and now it's back to you all. And then the request would be to schedule a public hearing as soon as possible.
Okay, can we get a motion to direct staff to schedule the public hearing?
So moved.
Moved by Alderman Gelhardt, second by Alderman Doherty. Any discussion? Yes, Alderwoman Shaw?
For some reason, I'm remembering there were some issues regarding this in years past when I first got on council. So I don't know if you've looked at any of the history on that building, but I know there was a delay on changing it over for some reason. So I just don't remember what it was. But I know there was something.
I've looked a little bit at it, and they're familiar with it also. But I don't have, I just know, all I've been able to find is that there was a request. I don't have not been able to find the more detailed minutia, I guess, of.
All that was done on paper minutes, I hate to say, but back in the day. But I know you all have a binder that keeps paper hard copies, so. But yeah, I just remember there was something that back in the day.
Okay.
Early 2000, or I got on 2006, so somewhere in that time frame.
All right, any other? Oh, yeah, Alderman Schmelz, go ahead.
Yeah, real quick. It's really unique, that building right next to it. That's business owned, the 725 property, like the red building.
Yes, there's three parcels. There's what you would consider the Sprecher brewery on Glendale. Then behind it, you have another parcel that has the red colonial
Right.
office building. And then attached to that with like a indoor breezeway is a connection to this manufacturing facility. So it used to be two different businesses, and then Sprecher ended up acquiring it all at this time. The big red colonial building, their goal would be to move their offices over there, which would free up space in the brewery building for another line of product. And then what they'd also like to do in that red building is somehow renovate it and also move their beer garden and all those types of things, gift shops. So they'd be on the lower level, and they have like an outdoor beer garden. That's kind of their bigger vision from that perspective.
Well, that's super cool, and that fits a lot better than having a bigger, industrial spot next door. Now, this is a half joke. If this goes to industrial, will it bother the neighbors behind there?
It's a cemetery behind
It's a
there.
cemetery, but there are other neighbors over there as well.
Sure, I was thinking more of the neighbors on
Said
Glendale.
behind.
Avenue.
We should
I'm
wait
like-
to hear- I think we should wait to hear from them.
Oh.
I have knocked on those doors and they are okay with it.
They're okay with it? Okay. So thank you. I just
Better
was,
beer garden.
I was more curious about the red building. Thank you.
The red building actually used to be the headquarters of Brady Corporation once upon a time. Before they moved over into, well, they moved to Good Hope, but they still keep a facility in Glendale as well. So, yeah.
So the
All right.
property-
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say the property owner of the west would get a public notice, but not every individual tenant in the property.
Right. All right. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of directing staff to schedule the public hearing for the rezoning of the Sprecher building, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next is item 5G. This is a request to schedule a public hearing on a zoning map amendment for a whole bunch of properties along Sunny Point Road and Sunny Point Lane that have been acquired by the city or MMSD. And it's to rezone them. We already had the hearing at the Plan Commission last meeting. Rezoning them from an R7 residential to a C1 conservancy zoning. I did have one lady in the audience who wanted to speak to this. So John, did you want to just, anything you want to add, and then I'll let her speak?
I'll just do a really quick introduction and then leave the move off to, from the table. So just for a refresher, all of these properties are owned by the city or the MMSD. The request is to put them into conservation zoning. They're currently R7. And the purpose is that is basically our deed restrictions that were placed on the property with the purchase from the MMSD does not allow us that those properties to be developed in the future for any kind of structures or those types of things. So putting it in the conservancy district, which our conservancy district does basically have two types of things: land that's in a conservancy and parkland. And that would put that into the right category from a zoning perspective. So I will be back in a little bit.
Okay, thank you. Want to speak to this item? I ask you to speak directly into the microphone so that everybody can hear you. Yep.
I am concerned about the zoning on the Milwaukee River. You have rezoned these properties that you're talking about are on the Milwaukee River, and they have been rezoned C1. Usually you would think that meant civic, but you mean conservancy in Glendale. And they've been zoned C1, and on another common council packet that I have from before, it says that the city, as the city obtains additional properties over the years, additional properties on the Milwaukee River. I have looked at your 2040 plan. I have reviewed numerous things. I do not see anything specific of your plan to use the properties on the Milwaukee River. As you know, the Estherbrook Dam having been removed, there is so much positive stuff on the river now. The flood, we haven't had a flood in 50 years. We've been there for 50 years. The possibility of a flood is way down. The river is probably down 4 feet, but it has only been said that it's down 6 inches. I know MMSD was involved in that, and supposedly they send their measurements to FEMA, and it takes a long time. I'm wondering who is going to check those measurements that Clark Dietz did? Because that is just anybody that lives on the river. That's just not true. And then because you have done that, you have changed and made the restrictions in the flood fringe area, which I've always been in, much stricter. And FEMA, if you were in the flood fringe area under FEMA, that was
a property that was a conforming structure. It didn't matter. And you were never in the 50% rule. It just didn't apply. I want to know specifically what the plan is for those properties on the Milwaukee River. And I think that the Planning Commission, the Southeastern Wisconsin Planning Commission, they have a map and a certain area of Riverview Drive. They want to make those into 5-acre parcels where only one residence can be on that property or one building. And it's crazy. This makes no sense. You are restricting people. You say that you want people to maintain and improve their properties in your plan, in your 2040 plan, but then you won't let them do it. This is the most ridiculous thing. I am trying to redo my kitchen and you're not letting me. And it's crazy. It is so crazy that I talk to people everywhere and they're like, well, no, they can't do that. I said, oh, really? That's not what I'm hearing. That's not what you told. I'm not doing anything structural, nothing structural. And there is a Wisconsin law that you're trying to supersede by trying to change FEMA. FEMA never, you have a cumulative thing here in Glendale. You can't do anything from the beginning of your property. So if your property is 60 years old, then, with the 50% rule, you can't improve it. I can't improve my property under your plan, which you say you want done. And it makes no sense and I don't understand it. And I might have to bring a lawsuit, but this is not acceptable. I want to know what your plan is for the Milwaukee River.
In the 2040 master plan, we didn't identify any development opportunities at all in that area. As a matter of fact, this particular area is R7 residential, except for the properties that have been acquired. Those will be turned into undevelopable conservancy land. So they would just remain as a green space. So whatever homes continue to exist there would continue to exist there unless those homeowners would sell their property as part of this particular plan. In terms of this referencing Sewer PAC may develop plans that they would like to see happen, but unless a city adopts them, and we have not adopted any plans for 5-acre lots. That sounds more like River Hills than Glendale. It does. We have no lot requirements for 5 acres anywhere, nor have we put it into our
Then
2040
why have
master.
you changed people from flood fringe to floodway? I had an elevation study done and the engineer said, people across the river from you, they can't believe it. They're now being told they're in the floodway. They've always been in the flood fringe and there were no restrictions in the flood fringe. You were a conforming structure. I mean, it's nuts. It's crazy. I mean, what is your plan? What is the plan and where do I find it?
There is no plan for developing that area. We have agreed.
Well, then why have you changed it? Why have you made it more restrictive when the river is better? There's less chance of flooding and there never was flooding. Why have you changed it? And that's only been a year or two that you've changed it.
So there is actually a new floodplain map that is currently in the process of being done that has not been released yet. I mean, there will be public comments and stuff when that is done.
I
But
want it checked because it's not accurate. That is not the right
The thing
measurement.
is, the rules for FEMA, once a floodplain is determined and a floodway is determined, then those rules are set by the federal government. It isn't the city restricting the 50% rule. I've just pulled up the FEMA
It's never
website.
done that. It's only because of Glendale and Clark Deeds and MMSD.
Okay.
And yeah, that's why it is. It was never like that.
Okay.
And you have other more restrictive.
So-
You look at assessed value as opposed to fair market value. You know what? This is just so wrong. I can't believe it. I can't believe you're doing this. And I want everybody to know.
I appreciate your comments. If you would like The motion tonight would be to schedule a public hearing for 30 days from now, which means in the next month, if you'd like to get your list of questions to staff, we can try to answer those and we can also spend some time explaining to you how the 50% rule works for FEMA, because it is 50% of the market value of the structure,
It
not
doesn't
the.
apply to the flood fringe.
Well,
Never did.
I I pulled it up right now. So if you'd like
It
the
never did.
staff could, explain to you how that rule works and why we're subject to it.
And you know, and that's why I have a question. Why? Why was this done now? Why? There is another reason. There is. And you, maybe you don't even know it.
Okay, well, I mean, we'll be happy to, like I said, staff will be happy to answer those questions for you. Tonight is just to schedule a public hearing for a month from now. So we have time in the next month for staff to be able to answer all of your questions and trying to explain how this 50% rule works. So.
I know how it works.
Okay.
It doesn't apply.
Okay.
It doesn't apply, and you're applying it where it doesn't apply.
Okay. Well, thank you. We appreciate your comments tonight. And like I said, if you want to get your questions to staff, we'd be happy to get those answered for you.
All right, thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Pat. All right. So the request tonight is just to schedule a public hearing for 30 days from now on these properties that are being rezoned. Can I get a motion to schedule a public hearing, please?
Moved.
Move by Alderman Schmelzing,
Second.
second by Alderman Gelhard. All those in favor of directing staff to schedule the hearing, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is also scheduling a public hearing. And Commissioner Seligman, did you want to speak to this? Okay. 'Cause I know you had reached out recently, so I saw you in the audience. So I wanted to make sure. Okay. So this is the home occupations ordinance that already came before us once. We then had some public input. We sent it to the Plan Commission. Plan Commission had its meeting last week. We had the public hearing, so now it's back for us to now schedule a public hearing. So can I get a motion to schedule a public hearing on the home occupations ordinance?
So moved.
Moved by Alderman Gelhard. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Alderman Bailey. We did have some input that came from members of the Plan Commission. I know those were sent out to everybody. John, is there anything you wanted to add that we should be aware of as we get ready for a public hearing in a month?
So the commentary that came out of the planning commission was with regard to the number of vehicles at a home occupation, and the concern was that was one home occupation vehicle essentially enough, and would that actually hamper someone's home occupation that may be actually starting to grow, but they're not quite ready to go find that industrial or commercial site, but yet they just have that need for that extra vehicle or something like that. So I think it's a really good point. And I think we can certainly consider the number of vehicles in terms of, there's lots of scenarios we went through over the last few weeks. One was, well, what if you have two people who are, let's say you have two people who want in a family, maybe someone's electrician or a plumber, they happen to bring their work trucks home. That's not a home occupation, but they could still be in the driveway. You could also have home occupations that have unmarked cars. And so one way around that would be just to say that all private vehicles and or home occupation vehicles have to be have a space either inside or on the property. So it's whatever you can fit on your driveway or in your garage, so it doesn't overspill into the public street. Some neighborhoods, that's going to probably mean a handful of cars, maybe 3, 4, because, there might be narrow driveways, single driveways. Other neighborhoods, we have turnaround driveways and, you could put a lot of cars out there. So you might want to also think about capping it, just because we have a lot of different geographic areas in Glendale that may have different outcomes, I guess. The other option we could consider is whether it's like marked or not. So does it have a sticker on the side that's advertising, or is it just look like a regular vehicle? It could be, my wife's vehicle, or it could be the kid's vehicle or whatever. You wouldn't really know the difference. So versus, maybe a florist truck or something. So we've been thinking about that. So when it gets to the public hearing, we'll be able to share some options with you.
All right, thank you. Did we get a motion on this yet? Okay, This has been moved then and seconded for a public hearing in a month. All those in favor of scheduling or directing staff to schedule the public hearing, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. And one more public hearing. This is zoning text amendment regarding front yard requirements in special institutional districts. And this mostly has to do with Nicolay property and the fact that the fence that they're building and there are structures being built just inside the fence. So can we get a motion to schedule the public hearing on that one? Moved by Alderman Bailey. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Vukovic. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor of directing staff to schedule that public hearing, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Just so you know, we had a bunch of public hearings at the Plan Commission last week. Nobody showed up for two of them. One person spoke to one other one. Another one had a bunch of comments. So yeah, we're scheduling a whole bunch of public hearings for a month from now, and everyone's thinking this first meeting in May is going to have 6 public hearings. There's probably 3 of them that nobody will show up for. So that was what we had at the Plan Commission. So, all right. So that concludes all of our business tonight. Next will be, we do have a closed session and then 2 items for consideration after we come out of closed session. But I'll go first for commission, committee, board, and staff reports. And I will start with the clerk.
I don't have anything.
Ballots go out tomorrow?
Correct.
Absentee ballots go out tomorrow. Yes. Okay, thank you. Chief?
Nothing to report tonight.
All right. City Administrator?
Thank you, Mayor. The only thing I have is, as you guys know, we had a significant and heavy snow event that occurred late last week into this week. And of course, it snowed again this morning pretty heavily. And I don't know that we all anticipated that on our drives to work. But that being said, we will start to schedule branch collection from private properties as long as they can bring it out to the curb and as long as our public works employees can haul it away. This was a big event. There was a lot of trees down throughout the city and of course, a lot of branches, both on public and private property. So you can imagine for the next month or so, our public works employees will be out there collecting branches and trees that fell on public property.
Carl,
We need to make sure that we're clear with people that, if half of a tree fell down and you drag it out to the front, you're going to have to break it down. Our public works crews can't take like half of a tree away, or if it's a huge branch that's 20 feet long, you're going to have to, it's going to be the homeowner's responsibility to break it up into, manageable portions so that then staff can haul it away.
That is correct, Mayor. Thank you for clarifying that. We will make sure we clarify that it has to be manageable, that one person can haul it away. Don't just take a whole tree that fell down if it's 30 feet, bring it out there and expect public works to take it away.
is there a maximum size for the branches? It's 4 feet for the yard waste, but I didn't know if we're gonna incorporate that into this drive.
We were looking at making it approximately 8 feet. So as long as it's 8 feet in a manageable size, our public works crews will haul that away.
Okay.
And it's going to be our public works crews. It's not GFL. They're the ones that have the really restrictive rules when they haul our stuff for us. So.
That is correct. And we did start today taking out public trees that had fallen down. So we will finish that up first to make sure there's nothing in the right of way or blocking vision triangles. After that, we will get to public or private property trees and branches that fell down. We just want to let people know so they can start taking it out to the curb as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
How long is this going to be going on? Because I want to make sure, we don't just let this go on forever.
Yeah, that's a good point. Hopefully we don't have another snow like this that comes up that extends this even further. I think Mr. Immigan and myself need to sit down and really assess the situation. Right now, it's hard to determine because this is an unusual event with a lot of trees out there. My initial expectation would be hopefully within 2 to 3 weeks of collecting, we would be done. We will have to revisit that. Hopefully the next city council meeting, I'll have an update for you.
Maybe it's like has to be to the curb at a certain date, and then at that point, staff will, take care of it, but nothing thereafter.
Yeah, that's a good idea and a good point. We will work out those details in the next day or two.
Thank you. Anything else for your report, or is that?
That's it. Thank you.
Okay, city attorney?
Thank you. I have nothing this evening. Thank you.
All right, number 6.
No library report, because that's up to Mr. Warwick now. But Music in the Glen, when are we meeting? We pretty much have all our acts done. I'm finalizing everyone with their contracts and whatnot. And Music in the Glen will be meeting on the 22nd here at City Hall. And just one act that I'm negotiating pricing right now, but otherwise I think we're pretty well set for the season.
Thank you. Number 5.
This Fourth of July, we have one interested food vendor that said they would sign up again. One is no longer in business and we've got feelers out to the others that we had last year. If you have any food trucks that might be coming by, you do that for Music in Glen, right?
Not this year, they said no.
They said no? Okay. I'm just, yeah, just reach out, let me know. We do have a person who is a volunteer who's trying to do that coordination. So we are looking for good food trucks.
Thank you. Number 4.
Nothing to report.
Number 3.
Nothing this evening.
Number 2.
Nothing this evening.
Number 1.
Nothing.
All right. ICC met today. Not an extensive amount of anything on the agenda, although I did want to just give a thank you out to Alderwoman Shaw, who happens to work at the facility where the ICC meeting was held. She did a wonderful job of making sure that we were all well taken care of. So, yeah. River Hills hosted today. It was at St. Christopher's Church. So, yeah. All right. So we are noticed now to go into a closed session to discuss a possible resignation agreement and release and a master service agreement with Jefferson Wells for accounting support services. So can I get a motion to convene in closed session to discuss those 2 items?
So moved.
Moved by Alderman Doherty. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Alderman Gelhard. All those in favor of convening in closed session, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are now in closed session. And if you all will help me remember, when we reconvene in open session, I need to say what time it is and who made the motions, so they're in the recording so that the clerk can do the minutes. So please, all of you, help me remember to do that. So, because then we turned the cameras are all back on and everything's back on, but it doesn't say how long we were paused. So. Now. Right, it is 7:54 PM. The motion to reconvene in open session was made by Alderwoman Vukovic, seconded by Alderman Schmelzling. The vote was unanimous. We are now reconvened in open session. We have had a conversation with staff. There is not a finalized resignation agreement and release, so there is nothing to vote on there. But there is, however, another item that we need to discuss. So I'm going to turn it over to the city administrator to talk with us about the master service agreement with Jefferson Wells Accounting.
Thank you, Mayor. Before the city council is an agreement for a statement of work and master services agreement for interim accounting services for a firm to be employed by the city of Glendale to provide audit preparation services, to prepare all the audit stuff for Clifton Larson Allen to review and provide us a finalized audit for fiscal year 2021.
Any discussion or any questions for the city administrator? Okay, can we get a motion then to approve the master services agreement and scope of work for Jefferson Wells to provide accounting support services to the city of Glendale to help us complete our 2021 audit?
I will motion.
Okay, moved by Alderwoman Vukovic. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Doherty. Is there any discussion? All right, all those in favor of approving the agreement with Jefferson Wells, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. And we are now finished all of our business items. So the next item on the agenda is a motion to adjourn. Can I get a motion to adjourn, please? Moved by Shaw, seconded by Gelhard and Bailey.
Everybody.
All right, all those in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We stand adjourned at 7:56 PM.
Yeah. Well, I had to buy